HO Talk Show. I to the ism, H to the Izzo Talk Show. And like we always do it this time, Sir Charles.
Max.
And as promised, we are continuing to celebrate and acknowledge some of our some of the greatness that we have even right here in Charlottesville when it comes to Women's History Month.
Yes.
And so, right now, Miss Max and I have with us none other than Miss Erin Brown. She is a lead news anchor over at our NBC channel, NBC 29. Thank you for joining us, Erin.
Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be here. I'm a little nervous. I'm not going to lie, because I'm used to asking the intervue questions, not the other way around. I'm sure you guys will go easy on me.
There's no camera. They can't see you.
That's true.
Well, that's not true.
Well,
I
guess
that's true. Yes, there are cameras. Well, they're not the cameras I'm used to.
Right.
So that's good.
Yeah. But hopefully this is a much more relaxed conversation because because the onus is on us to make this conversation go well, right?
Right. Yeah.
True. Yeah. But for those that don't know Miss Erin Brown, but by now I'm sure the majority have seen the face, they've heard the voice, right?
Mm-hmm.
Give us the backstory. Start wherever you want to start on the journey, right?
The journey, okay.
That led you to not only to be an NBC news anchor, but led you to Charlottesville, right?
Right.
So how did this interest, this passion for news start? Where did it start?
And I knew you were going to ask that question. I should have prepared better for it. But so how did my passion for news start? I definitely grew up in a very news heavy household. Both of my parents are, I would say that they're news junkies. They always had the news on. So I just kind of consumed the news kind of just through osmosis, right? Because they were watching it, so I was watching it, and I was aware of all the stories that were happening, locally, nationally, across the globe. And I always, I didn't always want to be a TV news anchor though, watching the news, but I did admire news anchors, and I loved watching them, and I loved listening to them, and watching how they handle certain stories, and listening to like their delivery and the different intonations in their voice, and how they use certain facial expressions or hand motions to convey a certain message, or to get an idea across, or to emphasize something. So I was very meticulous in watching what they were doing, to the point where I would kind of mimic it myself. Like when I would be telling someone a story, or I remember there were moments where I would even go in my bathroom, and I would look in the mirror, and I would
with the hairbrush.
The hairbrush microphone, and I would be, imitating what I saw on TV. But at the same time, I admired what they were doing, but I never really saw myself doing it. I just thought it was really a unique thing to watch. But again, I was consuming news my whole life, from like probably 5 years old, and on.
And where'd you grow up?
Richmond.
Okay.
Richmond.
Okay,
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah.
Like
so
Richmond.
we watched NBC 12. That was our station in Richmond. And but I never really saw myself doing it. I saw myself being more so behind the cameras. I've always loved writing as well. So, and my teachers picked up on my writing ability very young. So, they would always kind of encourage my mom to get me in, writing classes and writing workshops and honors English classes. And so I always wanted to be a writer of some sort. I thought I would take more of the like magazine route, because that's where I was headed in high school and college. But somehow, and I don't know, it could have just been by the powers that be, but somehow when I was in college, I landed an internship with ABC News. The network in New York.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So
you're not talking about Channel 8 in Richmond?
No. We're talking about Good Morning America, World News Tonight. And again, I don't know how I landed that. I still kind of that's a wonder of my life. How did I get that internship? I don't know, but so that kind of opened the TV news doors for me, landing that internship, and then I started. I kind of veered off of the magazine route and steered more toward TV. But
I'm sorry, I got to interject. Something I don't want to overlook is that it's important, especially for our youth, to hear on how, with the passion that you had, even if it led to writing for a magazine or what have you, how integral it is to have the right classes.
Right.
Yeah. Like to have the right foundation of being taught, like the critical way to do it. So I just wanted to point it out because that's a blessing that you have people in your corner to say, okay, like if it's what you want to do, we support it, but here's the foundation you need, as far as education.
Yes, absolutely. And I definitely got that at Radford University. I don't think I mentioned that I went to Radford, but Radford was, I think it was the perfect school for me. I didn't always recognize it at the time. But Radford was, they were very, Radford's a pretty small school. So we had a lot of small classroom sizes. And so I definitely had really close relationships with my teachers and my professors, and they were able to kind of help me. They were an integral part of steering me in the right direction, because they saw what I was good at, and they really helped me. They helped nourish the talents that they saw in me. So education is huge. It really is, and having the right people in your corner, that can make or break. So
and even when you mentioned high school, you mentioned being in the right English class, right? Things like that.
So shout out to teachers.
That's right. Yeah, we just had the city teacher of the year in here before you came in.
Oh, nice. So very nice.
For sure. So we are talking to Erin Brown, a news anchor for our NBC 29. And I didn't mean to cut you off. I just wanted to make sure we didn't overlook that. But yeah, go ahead and continue. So so you got that internship, and then what was following all this?
So, and it's, sorry to kind of ramble. It's been a long journey. It's been 10 years. So I'm kind of walking you all through a decade of my journey. So I'm kind of rambling a little bit, but so after I landed the internship in New York, I eventually landed a second internship with ABC in DC, which was a whole nother experience. Awesome to work in the nation's capital. So from there, so after my internships, that was about 8 months of my career, then I got into local news. I loved working at the network, but I wanted to experience local TV as well, which is, what I grew up watching, NBC 12. So my local TV news career took me all over the country. It started in Reno, Nevada, which is, that was wild. That was a wild journey. Reno, Nevada. Then I moved back to the East Coast and went to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Then I went up to New England, to Burlington, Vermont. My station before Charlottesville was Peoria, Illinois. And then I moved here to Charlottesville. And when I was in Peoria, I think, I had moved around a lot. And I think I just felt myself kind of get exhausted from the hopping around. I was proud of myself for doing it, because I told myself I'm going to experience the country, and I'm going to report the news all over the country, and I'm going to be an advocate for communities all over the U.S.
It seems like that's kind of a natural progression for local news anchors in that market. They kind of
they hop around.
Right. And just searching for the right thing, or just wanting to different experiences?
For me, it was just, different experiences, immersing myself in different cultures and different, states, and just experiencing new places.
Okay.
But, by the time I was in Peoria, that was my fourth move in a very short period of time. And it just got exhausting. I felt myself kind of burning out a little bit, and I just felt that I either needed to either leave the industry or, go back home and be somewhere more familiar, somewhere more comfortable.
Okay.
And just that was a big thing, was being familiar and comfortable.
Okay.
Because it's a lot to kind of hop around, and you have to embrace different communities and learn about,
gain the trust.
Right, exactly. Gain their trust, and you have to, educate yourself on the whole history basically of the community and the state and the issues and all it's just it's a lot.
Yeah.
And I didn't necessarily, I never saw myself kind of reaching that burnout point.
Okay.
But I did. I definitely did. And
so what kind of like recentered you?
Finding this job here in Charlottesville.
Okay.
Yeah, I was specifically looking for a job either back here in Virginia or just somewhere on the East Coast near my family, because I have family kind of spread out throughout the East Coast, Philadelphia, Boston, New York. I wanted to go somewhere near family, but I think the best thing for me was to come back to Virginia. And I was really hoping for a job opening in Virginia. And I remember that was like my prayer at the end of 2023. I was like, I hope that next year, I can find myself somewhere near family, somewhere where I'm comfortable and happy and familiar, and somewhere where I can just kind of, I don't want to use the word settle, because it's not like I'm settling for, Virginia, but I am kind of settling my...
Lay down some roots, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Lay down some roots and kind of just settle and start my life here and, build my personal life and my personal life here, as opposed to, every 2 to 3 years hopping around.
Right.
So, that was my prayer.
That's a prayer answer. So before we go deeper in that, though, we do have someone with interesting questions. So they must know you.
Okay.
Because in speaking of family and and wanting to be close, they said to ask you about your grandfather, the Tuskegee Airman.
Oh, yes. Wow.
Is Grandma
question.
listening?
That's a loyal listener.
Okay. That is a great question. Okay. Yes. So yes, that is a great question. I would love to talk about my grandfather. Okay. Yes, my grandfather was a Tuskegee Airman.
Okay.
And I shared that with, I recently went to Greenbrier Elementary for their Black History Month event, and I shared that with the students.
Yeah.
And I was so touched by their responses to that, and also just their knowledge of the Tuskegee Airmen. I didn't know if, 3rd and 4th graders necessarily knew who the Tuskegee Airmen were, but they did. They knew. And that was awesome. Really touching, because I never want that history to go away and to be forgotten. But yeah, my grandfather was a Tuskegee Airman, and I wish I had more to say about that and more about him, but he passed away when I was 10 years old. So I never actually got to, unfortunately, I never really got to have conversations with him about it. But boy, I wish I could.
Right.
I wish I could.
Yeah.
From what I've heard from like my mom and my aunts, I don't think he talked about the war very much. I think he was pretty tight-lipped about it. But just to have that history in my family I'm very proud that I am the granddaughter of a Tuskegee Airman.
Yeah, props to you.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you could feel it, though. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like there's some things that are genetic. There's things that are just like in the atmosphere of, like when it comes to our ancestors.
Right.
Like we may have thoughts, we may have visions, and we don't even know why. And then you may find out later, like, ooh, okay, well that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because my grandfather like went through this or was this place. Right. And we have those spiritual connections.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And I definitely feel his spirit a lot.
Yeah.
Because he was definitely he grew up in the civil rights era, and he was out there, protesting and sitting in at counters and at lunch counters and protesting. And he was definitely a fighter, definitely a fighter. I don't think I have as much fighter spirit in me as he did, but every now and then I'm like, okay, I can feel that. I think it's genetic, like you said.
Yeah. Okay. Now, so you made it to, and thank you for sharing that. By the way, that's a great
question.
Story.
Great question.
So you made it to Charlottesville, though.
Yes.
But I imagine there were bigger towns you could have went to. Mm-hmm. Maybe even more exposure, because you talked about the experience of going from place to place. Right. But like I always envisioned too that like it was all they also are like rings on a ladder as well. Mm-hmm. It's like you may move to a bigger market and whatnot. Right. So I'm curious on that thought process on like actual Charlottesville, like why Charlottesville?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah. I mean, if you asked me 10 years ago where I wanted to end up when I first started my career, I definitely would have said New York. That was there was nothing else that I was envisioning but New York. And I love New York. My family's from North Jersey, so I've been to New York many times, and it's my favorite city. It holds a special place in my heart. But I think throughout my career, things change. Like your goals change, your aspirations change, and really, I just didn't really want the glitz and the glam like I used to. New York's a big city. There's a lot going on. And I just kind of saw myself more so I want like that community feel. And I feel like when you're in a city with 8 million people, and there's just so much going on, I feel like you kind of miss out on that. And I really wanted to just to be part of a community. And I feel like you get that in smaller towns and cities. People know you, people trust you. You go to the grocery store and people come up to you and they spark conversation with you, and it's almost like you've known them for your whole life, but you're just meeting them. That's something that I think is lacking in the bigger markets. And
so let's talk about your experience at NBC 29.
Yeah, it's been great. It's been wonderful. I love my team there.
You're the morning news anchor.
Evening.
Okay.
Yeah. So I anchored the news with Steve Rappaport.
Okay.
4, 5, 6, 10, and 11. Okay. So you'll see me a lot. You'll see my face a lot. And I love it. I think that the team there is fantastic. I think that the news we deliver and the product we put on air is the best in the area. I may be a little biased, but I think that we just have our reporters, especially they're the ones who impress me the most. I think they just have their ear to the ground and they know what's happening, and they're quick to inform the community of what's going on, and they do it with such grace and poise, and they're really the rock stars of the operation, because they're out there in the elements, keeping everyone informed, and it's a great team to work with, and I'm so glad I got this opportunity.
And so how do you keep yourself, I'd say, like centered as a news anchor who, I mean, maybe we're more so talking about national, international news, but it also happens locally, where we're always talking about what the problem is. We're always talking about something bad that happened, informing people, but still we're other than maybe the weather, we're telling you where the problem is.
Right.
So how do you, keep motivated and stay going in an industry like that, where you may be always kind of delivering the not so good news?
Right. Yeah. I definitely, kind of, in a self-deprecating way, I refer to myself sometimes as the bearer of bad news, because that's what we, that's what we do. I mean, that's the nature of news, is unfortunately to talk about, the things that are, to talk about bad things. We're talking about house fires and car crashes, and we're talking about people losing their loved ones, and that can be very hard. It can be, it definitely weighs on you, and I find myself in the moment, kind of disconnected from, which I don't know if that's the best way to put it, but like I can't fully I have to kind of disconnect
Mm-hmm.
in the moment, because I just have to get the information out.
Mm-hmm.
But with that being said, there's been multiple times where I've gone home and just completely lost it. Just having a breakdown, or just not even a full breakdown, just letting myself feel that story and feel the impact and feel how it affected people. And because I've had to talk to parents who just lost a child, or parents or families who lost a home in a hurricane. And those are the stories that stick with you. And but in the moment, the job is to get the information out,
right?
And so there is a little bit of a disconnect that happens. I can't really tap into my emotions all that much in that moment. But that doesn't mean the emotions aren't there.
Right.
I just have to kind of put them aside for a second and say, okay, this is what happened today. And then, when the cameras turn off, then I can
be human.
Let it out. Yeah, be human. Yeah, and let it out. So it's not easy, but and I definitely, for anyone, in the industry or looking to get into the industry, I definitely would recommend having, an outlet. Self-care or just any type of outlet where you can decompress and just kind of just take care of yourself. Just take care of yourself, because we cover some really heavy issues, really heavy stuff. And
not to interrupt, but let's talk about the beautiful part about broadcast communication.
Yeah.
Because several years ago, I did some coursework at the Columbia School of Broadcasting for radio, and that was really spearheaded by my fascination with the art of communicating. From different perspectives. Obviously, talking about radio, you do television, but there's some people out there that are going to certainly be able to connect with what I'm saying and maybe what you'll share about television broadcasting. But it is an art, and when it's right, it's beautiful. And there's something just amazing about delivering information and the manner in which it's done, like you said, when you used to kind of imitate the news anchors when you were a kid. So can you kind of tap into that and talk about that part of it a little bit?
Oh, that's a great question. Man, I don't really I don't really know I don't really know how to tackle that question. But no, it is an art form, I would say. It's a, you're in a sense you're performing, and that's a great question.
Okay. Well, no,
you stumped me.
It's just
so how I would add on to that is that, like, you made me think when you were talking earlier about like your passions and your dreams, when you were in high school going into college. I thought you were going to mention something about theater. Or wanting to be in front of a camera.
Right. Yeah.
Like just when I heard you talk about practicing in front of the mirror, things like that. So so sort of to Max's point, like then down the road hearing you talk about how you sort of have to be the on air personality, and then off air is when you can kind of like be yourself and and sort of take a deep breath.
Yeah.
Because that is a lot like the stage, right?
Right. Yeah.
Right. Like so the news studio, even here right now on the radio, is sort of a stage.
Yeah.
And you have a job to do.
Right.
And you do have to compartmentalize.
Right. Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. Otherwise who knows? I mean, you'll just go crazy, So, but yeah, it definitely is, and you mentioned theater. I did dabble in theater a little bit as a teenager and a kid a little bit, but I was no good. I was no good. Not acting is not my thing.
Yeah.
Not at all. So, and I noticed that very quickly. I'm like, okay, this is not what I need to be doing. But there are similar.
Yeah.
The theater and any time I think you're communicating to the public, whether that's through the performing arts or journalism or public speaking, any time you're communicating any type of information for whatever purpose, for, informative reasons or for entertainment, for whatever. It is a performance of some sort.
Let's talk about maybe the responsibility. And this is something that, even I, and Charles being a Black male, myself being a Black female, when we get into these type of industries where we are representative of females, Black people, and things like that, whether we choose to accept that responsibility or not, we are in some ways their mouthpiece, their representation. We have an obligation to represent ourselves well. We have an obligation to represent those that we are standing with, or on the shoulders of, so to speak. And I like to think that in my case anyway, it drives me to do the best that I can possibly do. And so I wondered if that is your experience at all. I know we talked about your grandfather's legacy, but I'm sure some of that is bound to come. You're bound to carry some of that with you in your job on the day to day.
Yeah.
Or maybe you don't,
just carrying the weight of being like a woman. And
yes.
Yeah. That's another great question. another stumper.
Well, I'm sure that's, even if we're not necessarily thinking on those things, it's bound to come up, especially if an individual works in a industry that's dominated by their counterparts or dominated by men. You by default, I would think, have to represent yourself. And kind of stand up as a female, being among those who may not look like you or have the same background, things like that.
Yeah, I've definitely come across that in my career because if you remember earlier in the conversation, I mentioned that I reported in Burlington, Vermont, which is, I think it's the second whitest state in the country. And I was the only Black person in that newsroom. So I definitely felt a responsibility to make sure that Black voices were heard on that news station. And I would, seek out, Black artists or Black politicians or Black entrepreneurs to highlight and to say, hey, this is what we're doing in the community. And this was also, I was also a reporter during the time of 2020 when we had the George Floyd protest and Black Lives Matter was really taking off, and there was so much talk about Black trauma, and we were just so hyper focused on the things that were bad happening in the Black community. So I really wanted to highlight and say it's not all bad. We're Black people we're so diverse in and of ourselves, and our experiences, our talents, our lives are just we're not just defined by that one thing, trauma. We're doing so many we have so many beautiful stories to tell, and I just wanted to make sure that, and it was important that we talked about, the things that were being brought up during that time. It's extremely important that those things were touched upon and highlighted. But let's also look at the flip side of that and look at what Black people have done despite all of the ugly that has happened to us in this country. Like we don't have to always harp on that. We can also we can look at all the beauty and triumph that has come out of the trauma of that Black people have experienced in this country. So that's really what I set out to do. And I hope I did a good job. I really, that was my, that was my focus.
So you were trying to relay that while in Vermont, right?
Right.
Okay. Right. Yeah. So I can imagine, the pressure that you probably felt sometimes, because you're seeing this tragedy.
Right.
and then you're looking around and you're like, and you are the black voice, you are the black face, so to speak. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And I also can imagine that being in Vermont, which is known to be pretty liberal, that probably made it a little easier because most people probably were on more of the side of of justice, I guess I could say, versus if you were in a more conservative area at the time. But sort of feeding off of that though, like talk a little bit about maybe like code switching. Because code switching is I always find that interesting. Because we all within different careers, different spaces and whatnot. Like I can just imagine that, I can imagine like that there had to be like some point to where you kind of wanted to sort of take a step back and be like, let me tell you how I feel.
Right.
Let Erin from Richmond tell you something. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But like what's some of your coping skills when it comes to that, right? Of I guess going back to knowing that you have a job to do. Right. And sort of separating. But again, like as Max is saying, when something hits home, like when it's real personal, like how do you do it? Because we have the liberty here of not having to do that. You know, like of course, like there's some serious, we know when to get serious and when to joke, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like we do have that flexibility here being the format that we are.
Right.
But I'm just curious if you could like maybe share a little bit more. Maybe you may have a story.
Right.
To where it was hard.
All my life.
Yeah. It was hard sometimes. But I think it's the same that I was talking about earlier with, just kind of disconnecting. But that was hard, when we're talking about issues affecting Black people, because some of these issues I've experienced myself or my family has experienced, or, a cousin or, an aunt, uncle. So like it was hard to kind of to separate myself from that. And it also, at some point, it also felt like I was doing the Black community a disservice by disconnecting. Because I'm like, should I tap more into this? Or do I, stay impartial and step back from it? So I kind of, I struggled with that a lot on the job. And that was a daily battle. What do I do? Do I tap in and really, let the emotions flow when I tell the story, or do I take a step back and stay the, the impartial, unbiased news reporter that I am? I do think that most times I took the latter.
Right.
Would
you have to.
Yeah, right. That was the job at hand, and I definitely grappled with that the dichotomy of staying a professional news reporter and or being that personal Black person who has experienced these things. So that was tough. And I definitely, there were a lot of moments where I, like I said, some days I would go home and just let it all out, because I was like, I don't know if I'm doing a good job. I don't know if I'm doing the Black community a service here. Am I letting them down? Because again, the Black community in Vermont was so small.
Right.
And, I'm like,
who you're reporting to makes a difference too.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I wanted that small community to feel heard and seen. And sometimes I think to this day, I'm like, I don't know if I did I help them in any way, or was I, what would they say if I asked them, like, how do you think I helped or didn't help?
I think that having that self-reflection is what makes a good person in general, right? Is when you question whether or not, what the healthy level of whether or not when you question whether or not you did a good job.
Right.
And when you mentioned earlier, just not all Black people being the same, I could relate in the sense that I was just raised a little north of Charlottesville, out in Greene County. And I've mentioned on the show before that I was certainly raised with to have self-respect. That was something that that my parents instilled in me, and something that I kind of got by osmosis. I mentioned my grandmother earlier in the show, but never Black self-respect. And so I was ignorant about just a lot of things as it pertains to the Black community and different challenges and things like that until I got much older. And I think that to a degree, there is a bit of a blessing in that, because I didn't show up on different stages and platforms to be the Black spokesman or the female spokesman, or I didn't show up for that. I showed up to do the best job that I was there to do, no matter who was in the room, right? And again, I think that there's an element of blessing in that, because it allows, I think, in my humble opinion, it allows us to be able to see and do as in this world as we're supposed to. It's not necessarily a Black thing. It ain't a white thing. It ain't a male thing. It ain't a female thing, but it's just a humankind thing. Right. So I certainly can relate to your responses there.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate you saying that.
Yeah. I'm curious on, where was your favorite place to report out of? Like any interesting story? Because I saw how Reno made you smile. So I can imagine you got a Reno
stories.
But Reno's interesting.
Like, but what's been your, and I'm not trying to incriminate you here in Charlottesville. I don't think you got to say Charlottesville, but I'm curious. Yeah, like out of your travels, like what maybe has been most memorable, maybe.
Yeah. No, I think the most my favorite place where I've lived and worked would be Vermont.
Okay.
Vermont was, there were challenges there, like I brought up, but Vermont it's like a hidden gem, I think, in the country. I think a lot of people forget about it too, because I would tell people like, oh yeah, I used to live in Vermont, and they're like, oh yeah, Vermont.
Where is that again?
Yeah, wait a minute, is that part of the United States? People forget about Vermont, but Vermont is this idyllic, just beautiful. It's kind of like Virginia when in terms of natural beauty,
right?
And actually, just
got a lot of pedestrians and bike riders there.
Yeah, I was about to say yes. Just like how Charlottesville has the downtown mall, we had something similar in Burlington, Vermont. So I actually think the same person created both. I think when you look at both, you'll see similarities. So I think the same person created both of those.
And is Burlington a college town?
It is. The University of Vermont is there.
Right. Okay.
And it's just beautiful. There, it's also on a Lake Champlain, which connects Vermont and New York, and it's just beautiful. Like when I got there, I was just like stunned, because I thought Vermont was just cows and and farmland, and most of it is, but Burlington is the biggest city in Vermont, and it's just beautiful. It really is, and I really had a great time there, and I think I met a lot of good friends there, and I felt at home like as soon as I got there, and it might have been the similarities between Vermont and Virginia that made me feel that way. I liked Vermont.
Yeah. Well, I have to ask, because I've been looking at this tattoo that says "phenomenal" all show long.
Oh yeah.
what's the so you got to explain the backstory behind that.
Yeah. So people probably wouldn't guess this about me, but I actually have 7 tattoos.
Okay.
And people probably wouldn't guess that. And you pointed out one of them. It says "phenomenal," and this is actually I really like the "Phenomenal Woman" poem by Maya Angelou.
Yeah.
So this is tribute to that.
Yeah. Okay.
That's awesome.
I just there's not much else to it. I like that poem. I like what it represents, and I like how it makes me feel when I read it. So I tattooed it on my wrist to remind me that I am a phenomenal woman.
There you go.
Yeah.
And the phenomenal woman that you're listening to is none other than Erin Brown. She is NBC news anchor. And as we've been saying, this is Women's History Month. You mentioned my Angelou. So who's some of your inspiration?
Ooh, good question.
You know, because I can imagine, being in such a field, you may draw inspiration off of others that's done it before.
Right. That's a great question. And I don't know why I'm blanking.
Like a Barbara Walters, or Oprah Winfrey, somebody like that.
Those are.
Or did you have a mentor?
A mentor. I've had a few mentors along the way. Just each stop along my journey, I've always kind of picked up a mentor. Most of them being women. And actually, when I interned at ABC News, I got to meet Robin Roberts.
I was going to say Robin Roberts. That's one of my favorites.
Because
for one, she was on ESPN at one time.
Right.
And then you mentioned Good Morning America earlier. I love Robin Roberts.
It was so great meeting her. She's so sweet. I only got to talk to her for like a minute, but it was one of the best minutes. She's such a sweet lady. I also got to meet Diane Sawyer, who is also, I think, a powerhouse in journalism. So
who's the best doing it right now?
Awesome. The best doing it right
Female
now?
Journalist.
That's a good question.
Anybody?
I don't.
Yeah. No.
Gosh, I don't know. I also don't want to.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't want to.
Okay.
Show any bias.
Yeah, that's fine.
I think they're all doing a phenomenal job.
Cool. Yeah.
All of them.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, good stuff. The only other thing that I had in mind, and because I think it's just so important to news right now, and and as comfortable as you are, because hopefully you feel like this is a safe space, like you're off the clock.
Right.
But but in the job that we all have, right? Whether it's here on the radio, it's on TV or whatnot, like the world is going through a lot right now. Even just last week, over the last couple of weeks, Charlottesville itself was like seemed like it was constantly being hit with some sort of drama, some sort of huge emergency response. And so, I just kind of wanted your thoughts on that, on like the importance of having that job, right? Of realizing that we're in like perilous times, right? And I know you have a job to do,
right?
But, and I'm trying to think of the right way to phrase it, but it's, but at, like at the same time, like I'm sure that the way that that you relay the information or something, like there has to be something inside of you that that knows how important what I'm talking about,
right?
Right now, like when when the camera and the lights are on, it's like people need to know this, people need to hear this, and and even within that, like are there certain stories that you're able to stay away from, or certain stories that you maybe can navigate more towards, but I know I was saying a lot, but just trying to phrase it because there's so much right now. Right.
Yeah, there's a lot.
And like the fact checking isn't what it should be, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. So I'm just curious on
fake news.
Fake news is rampant.
Right.
Like any of that. And thanks, Max. That's a big point. Right. It's like people don't trust any news source anymore.
Right. Yeah.
So how do you approach that?
Yeah. So I think your first question being, how do you convey importance or urgency when it comes to certain stories? Like for instance, the UVA was on lockdown twice last week. First for the guy who was stopped by police at a traffic stop and then ran off and was eventually arrested. And then the second being there was a stabbing suspect on the run at UVA. He was also arrested, but and that incident actually happened while we were on the air. So, we're breaking into our coverage, telling people, okay, this is happening. UVA is telling you to shelter in place. There's a guy on the run with a knife. And at the same time, we're sending a crew to the scene. So we're letting the viewers know, we have a crew on the way. Stick with us. We'll keep you informed. So, in an instance like that, I do think that my demeanor changes a little bit when it comes to breaking news, and because I want people to know this is serious, you know, like, this is urgent. It's happening right now. You know, there's a directive from UVA to shelter in place. Please take that seriously. You know, like you want people to kind of feel the urgency in your voice and your demeanor and your delivery. So I try to do that. And I also watch that, you know, growing up, watching the news with, you know, the first incident that pops in my mind is 9/11. That was probably the first really big news story that I consumed as a child. I was 9 years old when 9/11 happened, and again, I remember just being so locked into the news anchors and what they were saying and how they were saying it, and you know, their delivery, and
because on the other side of that, we're like, oh, this is serious, depending on how that delivery comes across.
Because if they just said it kind of cavalier and lackadaisical, it's like, oh, why are they acting like, is it not that serious? Like you're then you're confused. But you know, you could feel that with their delivery and their tone and their intonations and facial expressions, and I was watching that, and so I guess I kind of watched through observation. I mean, I learned through observation, and I definitely feel myself in instances where I'm reporting on things like the UVA shelter in place. I can feel myself. I can kind of feel myself going back to that little girl in the mirror, you know, and I'm like, this is serious. You have to let people know, like you have to, you can't drop the ball on this. You have to convey the importance of this, just like I saw news anchors do on 9/11 and, you know, Hurricane Katrina and, you know, the Virginia Tech shooting. And, you know, I watched all these events, and I was so carefully watching them and how they were telling me about a major event. And I want to do that, be that same voice for someone else sitting at home.
Because you're also dealing with everybody on social media becomes a news reporter.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So
that is
like, so you're battling that as well.
Yeah.
And so I have to ask you too, how do you react, or how do you respond, I guess, like when it comes to like the two instances that we just had last week, like you said? It's one of the big things that caused the uproar in the community is the feeling that the blackmail was reported on, or the reports on the blackmail were more harsh than the white male, right? So what's your methodology there? Like when it comes, and I'm curious, like if you ever get like a news flash, and does anything ever strike you wrong, or do you have to inflect a certain way? Like when it comes to making sure that, okay, we cover, like, so we have a black male and a white male, both in trouble with the law, both are evading the law.
Right.
Like, so let's not make one necessarily sound worse than the other based on any stereotypes.
Right.
You follow what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, how do you handle that? Because that was a big thing last week. A lot of folks felt like, and I don't know if they were watching NBC or any other channel, but just in general, folks were like, ooh, well, like the black guy was being called this and that, and the white guy was like, didn't seem like a big deal.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. That's a great question. I think it's important. So for that example, like, I think both should be treated the same way. You know, so if we're going to say the black man's race, you know, if we're going to say, hey, it's a black man who's on the run, then we should also do that for the white man, you know, like, as opposed to just, oh, there's a black man on the run and then there's a man on the run, you know, well, we reported on the other man's race, so we should do the same, you know, just to keep it fair. And also people need to know that, because you're saying, if there's a man on the run, well, what does he look like? There's a lot of men out here, you know, like, who are we looking for? So
I think at one point, there was a news release that said, and not by NBC 29, but said that they were looking for a black male in a gray hoodie. And I'm like, okay, you just like described most black males
right
in Charlottesville.
Right.
But how much of what you all report, how much of the language that you all use when you report is language that is provided to you by, I guess, then the Virginia State Police who were handling that situation, or at least the initial encounters of that situation,
right?
Because sometimes it's just like, I imagine it's just industry jargon or language, doesn't make it right, but a lot of your reporting and the language that you use is based on the information that you're given, right? You try to stay as closely to that as possible. Right.
We're typically given that information either from Virginia State Police, Charlottesville, Albemarle County, UVA Police. So we're handed that information. Yeah.
Are there any kind of like corrective measures? Like, have you ever received something and been like, whoa, like we got to rewrite this, like what kind of liberties are there when it comes to that? If if something feels off or seems off,
right? That's a good question. Personally, I don't think I've come across that.
Okay.
In my career, but I think newsrooms, just generally speaking, we do have the liberty to rewrite things.
Okay.
And especially because a lot of the press releases that come to us are, we call it police speak. They're written in police speak. They're not necessarily written conversationally. So we rewrite them anyway because there's words like there's phrases like, oh, he fled on foot, and we're like, that's not very conversational. We don't say someone fled. We say someone ran away or drove off. So we'll rewrite things like that. No, not throwing any shade at police. That's their job to write it like that. Right. But it's our job to rewrite it and make it more conversational so that it hits the viewer's ear a little bit easier, better to understand.
Yeah, because they have to state it in a legal way,
right?
To where it's not incriminating and not all that good stuff. Yeah. So wow, thanks for all this insight. This is awesome.
No, you're welcome.
And definitely hope this is not the last time we get to sit and chat.
Absolutely.
And talk about your work. Lastly, I heard you mention, Charlottesville seems like a good, comfortable place to sort of, stake roots, as Max was saying.
Yeah.
But in general, like, what do you want to leave us with? Like, what should we be on the lookout for? Like, sort of, what's next? Is it, are there further goals in your journalism career that that you're working on? Or?
Right now, I'm planning on staying put.
Okay.
I'm planning on being in Charlottesville for a while. Virginia is home. Richmond is home. It's not too far away. So that was the main draw to Charlottesville, was being not too far from Richmond and where I grew up. So I'm really happy to be here. It's been such a long journey, 10 years, and to get the opportunity to come home, even though Charlottesville itself is not where I grew up, but I still call it home because it's Virginia.
Central Virginia.
Central Virginia. Yeah. So even just to have that opportunity is a blessing. I feel like I feel like for a lot of journalists that is their goal to go back home. Some of them get it, some of them don't. So for me to get that opportunity is it's a blessing and it's beautiful, and I don't ever take for granted the fact that I'm a journalist in my home state. Yeah. Because it's just and like I talked about earlier, like the struggle of hopping around to different cities and states and having to embrace all these new communities, and I didn't have to, I don't even have to try, here in Central Virginia. It's just natural. This is my home. This is my community. I came here with certain knowledge about the state, the different towns, the different schools and universities, and the issues and the politicians. And so I didn't have to, do all that legwork. It was already there for me. And it was just, as soon as I got back to Virginia, it was just like, it was like I was just hopping right back into it, like I'm
hit the ground running.
Yeah. And it's just it's been great. It really has been. That's awesome. And I'm just so happy to be back in Virginia. It's a great place to grow up, which I did. And it was great that I left too, because when I left for as long as I did, I felt, it makes that yearning for home even stronger. And that's really what I felt when I was in Illinois. I was like, man, Virginia is so much prettier than this. And I'm like, Illinois is nothing compared to Virginia. Like just the natural beauty, the history, we're right by, the nation's capital. Like we just have so much going on here in Virginia, and I just miss that. And I wouldn't have appreciated Virginia the way I do now had I not gone, had I not left.
That's important.
It is, and I'm so glad I had. Lesson. It is. I mean, there's no place like home. It's the cheesiest thing to say, but it's true. It's so true. There's no place like home, and I'm so glad I found my way back home.
Awesome.
Well, thank you, Erin. Thank you for your work. Thank you for being a trusted voice in our community.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. I'm so happy to be that and to be here. So thank you for having me. This was fun.
Of course.
All
right.
Until next time.
Until next time.